I'm Arlyeon.
And I'm Chariot Rider.
In this episode, we'll be talking about Celeste, specifically touching on some of the mechanics of the game, as well as just some of the thematic narrative elements that we found noteworthy, as long as just sort of our final thoughts on the game. Celeste, the mountain climbing game that also happens to deal wonderfully with the themes of anxiety and depression.
Yay.
Cry.
Fun topics.
You kicking this off or am I?
I thought you might kick off the mechanics, but I guess I could kick it off if you wanted to. But anyway, so we're going to start off by talking about the mechanics, which will remain generally spoiler-free. But if you are afraid of just, mechanical spoilers, because I know I sometimes care about that sort of thing, you might not want to watch this period. Just go play Celeste. It's a good game. And then come back. But generally, there shouldn't be too many story spoilers for this first part.
And
as
even
we talk about the mechanics.
A lot of the stuff that you can do off the hop basically remains consistent throughout the game. A lot of the mechanics are more or less based off of the obstacles you confront, at least until you reach very late into the game.
Yes, which I guess we'll get to that point. But I guess I sort of had a couple notes here on the mechanics that I sort of wanted to bring up. So I wanted to sort of start with where are the developers coming from when they were making this game. So there was a GDC talk at GDC 2017 where the main developers, they were talking about their inspiration. Well, they were talking about the level design, but they sort of talked about how Celeste and its level design was somewhat inspired by actual real-life mountain climbing in certain regards. And there are two big areas where they took inspiration. The first of these would be the idea of safety and how different actions are going to require different things from the climbers. So essentially, they give the example of when you're climbing a mountain, you might need a lot of core strength to balance yourself at some points, but at other points, you might need a lot of finger dexterity to grip onto a shallow ledge. And so this is transferred over into Celeste in a way, because all of your moves have some sort of cost to them. So you can dash in midair, which you can only do this once, and then you have to rest on solid ground before you can do it again. And that's its cost. You can wall climb, but you can only wall climb so much before you start losing your grip. And you can also wall jump, which wall jumping, it doesn't work like it does in Super Meat Boy, because in Super Meat Boy, you can just wall jump and get up the wall, and that's that. But in Celeste, you can't really do that. You just actually go lower down onto the wall you jumped from. So you need to have a second wall to bounce in between.
Although it is far more efficient to wall jump between two walls than to wall climb. Wall climbing is incredibly efficient if you're just trying to straight up climb up a wall. Part of its thing is a lot of the costs of these mechanics also have a synergy with each other. If you're trying to get up a wall, ricocheting between two walls is a lot less costly to your overall grip strength, which, like your dash, only actually replenishes when you are able to stand on solid ground.
Definitely. And so what they tried to do is each of these different moves has a different tension that they bring. So with climbing up the wall, you only have so long. So you might need to figure out, okay, how am I going to preserve my grip strength so I can use it at the very end of this to get back up onto the ledge? Or how am I going to get to this part of the level where I can wall jump? Wall jumping ties into that. And okay, when is the best point for me to use my dash to get to where I need to go? So each of these mechanics ties into some sort of tension that the developers tried to weave into the level design. So this allows them to vary the level design and have each level give a different sort of tension. So if you have a level focused on climbing, that's going to be very different than a level focused on timing your dashes, which is going to be very different than, jumping between two walls that constantly blink back and forth in one level that is sort of infamous, but we might touch back on that later.
And even there's just some levels that deal with a lot of hostile environments, different things. Some are as simple as if you touch such and such obstacle, you die. And there's others that are more like platforms which lose their solidity once you've stayed on them for too long. Or if you stand on them too long, they fling you straight up into spikes.
Yes. There are, because like that's the main way that Celeste keeps its levels varied, is it keeps its levels varied by having level mechanics that change from level to level instead of your character progressing for the most part. With one minor exception, your character abilities stay the same for most of the game, and then the level is actually what changes. So in like the first level, there's like traffic lights that whenever you grip onto them, they burst forward. And then in the second level, there are like these void things that you dash through, which and each level has their own
galaxy
set of mechanics.
Tiles. They're little galaxy tiles. They're little starlight cubes or shapes that when you dash into them, you turn into a ball of energy and dash at a very precise straight line at the angle you went into it out the other end, which will more often than not lead to instant death if you land into a solid wall or a spike. But in dashing into it, it resets your dash in the middle. Like successfully dashing into one of these resets your dash, which is a lot of things. Is you start to recognize that these unique obstacles are things that actually can be troublesome, but also empowering. The stoplights, whilst they can get you killed, they also provide you momentum to go and throw yourself forward. The galaxy tiles provide you a reset to your dash. The clouds are just a platform. I mean, that's pretty simple.
I guess like there's like the I'm trying to think of the third level. Like the third level mostly just wants to kill you. I don't think there's anything that really helps you out there. There's like the dust bunnies, and they're not helpful at all. They just sort of go back and forth, and that's
you can jump on the manager's head.
I mean, I guess that's true, but you can also jump on Battlin's head.
Wait, can you?
And it's sort of in the one.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, in that section of the game, we'll get there.
But you have to there. That you have to do that. For him, you don't, but you totally can, and you can use that to progress. And that's an optional thing. So
I mean, same thing with like the Lovecraftian monsters. You don't have to jump on their heads, but doing so makes that section a lot easier.
Also, though, the impediment that you have to carry along with you is also super handy as a weapon, a switch, and other things.
Yes.
So I mean, that's one of those. It's a nuisance to keep track of and to cope around, but it's also sort of useful at the same time. Which I thought was neat.
Yeah, like you have a burden, but at least it has some bonuses, which is better than just having a burden, in my opinion. Then again, like sometimes if the burden is interesting, it can still be interesting. But so that's sort of the first bit of inspiration that they took from mountain climbing. But the second part of the mountain climbing that they took inspiration from, I actually find this super interesting. Which this is when you're mountain climbing, there are usually multiple paths which you can take to get from point A to point B. So if you're like really tall, for instance, you could just skip certain nooks and crannies because your arms can reach farther than someone who doesn't have, as tall of a body. So you can skip certain things. And Celeste sort of works in a similar way because there are, levels which it presents you, but you can do them in different ways depending on how you use your abilities. So if you want to wall jump in between the two walls to get up to the platform, or if you want to dash onto the platform and then climb up to the top, or if you want to dash up to the other platform and jump from it, you can do that. And so what this does is it lets you be more expressive in your platforming, and it lets you sort of decide how you want to tackle these challenges. I mean, it's obviously to a point. It can't give you an infinite number of challenges to, or an infinite number of ways to come at each challenge, but they leave in a couple of ways for every level in the game.
At
which
least
I just thought
for
this
the
was
A
really
sides, the B sides and upwards start to get a lot more precise in the way that you need to tackle things.
Yes. Which, yeah, so those are more linear, and I feel like they were mostly a challenge for players who want to do that. But for at least the A sides, which I really
It's the
enjoyed all the
basic
A
difficulty
sides.
of the game.
Yeah, like, and I think it's what the game's intended difficulty was supposed to be. And then like the B sides would be the optional hard mode. So they're going to come with certain limitations. And obviously, if you let someone come at a thing from multiple different ways, it's going to be easier, but not always. Like, I think a good example of this is, so, you know, like those, there's a couple of these sorts of rooms where...
Actually, I was going to interject here if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
A good example of this is
I
the first level you can clear without dashing. It's entirely possible to clear the entirety of the first stage without dashing, and there's a reward for that, even.
Really? I did not know that.
Yes, you can get a golden strawberry. That's how you get that golden strawberry at the start level, is by clearing it without using your dash or dying.
Without dying.
And without the dash.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was like, oh, maybe I'll go get that. Because I've been playing through this level a lot because I've been writing a script about Celeste, but the not dying part is where things get...
On the other half of the mechanics that I think is really interesting is there's a number of like tricks, little speedrunning techniques, like the extended wall jumps and even spike jumping, which the developers know about and are actually intended. Like, you actually get taught extended wall jumps at the very end of the B-side, and they're complete pains to do, but they open up the ways that you can approach and tackle levels immensely.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, it gives you more expressive ways to get through each level. Which actually, like... So in, like, the GDC talk, they mentioned, like, this one level. I don't know if you know, like, remember the one specifically I'm talking about. But there's a tall, skinny block of ice that falls when you jump on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a ledge with a spike on the side. And if you jump too early, you run into the spike. And if you jump too late, you fall to your death. And then you jump onto a crumbling platform. It's in the first level. Mm-hmm. Do you remember this level?
I recall it, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, like, this was the level he was talking about, you know, in terms of, you know, many different... Or he mentioned that players used to be able to skip the entire first block if they... I think, like, if you do the trick where you jump right before you leave the platform after dashing, so you can, like, extend your jump. Or if you did that, you could make it all the way to the other side. But then, like, you know, they raised up the spikes a little bit, so that was no longer possible. But you can actually still sort of do this trick. And actually, I was messing around in Celeste earlier, and I actually pulled it off once, where if you go along the bottom, there's a small bit of wall without any spikes on it, and if you jump on each of these spikes, you can make it to the other side. without having to go along the ice block. And so this is a speedrunning trick that's just sort of cool. And, you know, it's he talked about how you have to make, when you're leaving in these speedrunning tricks, you have to make it obvious that these are not the intended solutions. Because otherwise you'll just get players that get frustrated trying to do these things when there's a much simpler solution elsewhere. And so you need to make this obviously something that is for super advanced players who are speedrunning, essentially. And that's pretty important, because otherwise you just get confusion, and that's not good. So those are like the two main inspirations that they took from real life mountain climbing that I wanted to mention. So I guess now do we want to talk about our favorite levels?
Actually, before we get to our favorite levels, one thing I do appreciate for Celeste is it doesn't have super aggravating, like, tutorials. There's little signs you pass by that tell you mechanics, and then it basically just lets you run free and make a bunch of horrible mistakes over and over again.
Yes, like, this sort of, like, design goes all the way back to Super Mario Brothers on the NES, where it can teach the player exactly what they need to do without saying a word. And so all of the levels with their new sorts of mechanics, it doesn't spend a word explaining these. It just lets the player see how they work, and it introduces them to these mechanics in, like, a safe environment. So that way they can sort of see how they work, and then it builds on that from there. Because if you just throw the player into the most, you know, if you throw them into, like, the final Seaside challenge of the game, you know, right after they learn all the basic mechanics, they're not going to have a fun time. But that's just going to be frustrating and annoying, and they're not going to have any idea what any of these things do, and that's
they
not
won't
really
have a single idea of any of the mechanics, because, like, the C-sides are the epitome of the challenge. The A-sides have challenging segments, but they're a lot more, I would say, fair and less built around frustration. So they're a very accessible way of, because they tend to, you know, start with a bunch of easier challenges that teach players the basic, this is these mechanics, this is how you deal with it. And the Seaside just goes like, here's a challenge, deal with it. And then you die a lot.
Yes, many hundreds of times.
So, on the subject of death and a lot, what is the best level in the game for you?
Alright, so in my opinion, there's a very clear best level in the game, which, like, in my opinion, this is the second level. So the one with the void galaxies.
Okay.
I absolutely adore this level. On a narrative level, on a mechanics level, I think, like I guess, like, the void galaxy thing. These things are introduced in such an interesting way. So when the level starts off, you are where you are after the first level, but things are off a little bit. So there's, like, a memorial to everyone that's died on the mountain, which is not a good omen, but it's you choose to persevere nonetheless. But when you go into the second level, it's all jumbled, and something is clearly wrong here. And you choose to continue exploring, and in this old abandoned castle ruin place, there are all these faded blocks, which at this point the player has no idea what they do, because you can't dash through them. Like, they just function like any other wall. But this, like, you know, makes the player wonder, well, what do these do? Like, you know, they're just like a normal block, and so why are they sitting here? And then, you know, you go through the rest of the level, and eventually you stumble into a room with a mirror. And so this is when the game's main, I guess if you want to call her an antagonist, you can call her an antagonist. I guess we'll get to that point later. But this is when she's first introduced.
Battle line.
And then, yes, Battleon. But at this point, the entire level changes. So this is going back to that folded level design of... So you've gone through the levels one way, but now, going through the level a second time in reverse, you have all these fun new mechanics to play with, and it completely changes how you go through the level.
Especially because it was a descent. It was a fairly simple descent.
Yes, there's not a lot to it. You're just sort of climbing. I don't think there's any death pits.
No.
There might be a couple pits of spikes, but that's about it.
But then there's the issue of, like, getting back out now.
Yes. And then getting back out, you have this completely new challenge that you have to do to get out, because these blocks enable you to move around the level in a way that you couldn't before. And these blocks are just so satisfying, to go through. And, the level mechanic is so brilliant. I absolutely love it. Did you do the thing,
too, of just, like, dashing back and forth through one?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's, like, that whole room with, like, a bunch of them. And there's, like, the 3 little yellow things you can collect to get a strawberry.
Yeah.
And you could just dash through all of these, because you get your dash back immediately after using them. And then you dash through all of them. And that's just a fun little challenge that you do on your way back. But then, after you get back to the top, this is where things get really interesting. So you've gone through this place a second time with the folded level design that we were just sort of talking about. I mean, folded level design is a little bit more, but essentially, it's when you can go through a level a second time, and then something is different, or it changes based on what equipment you have, or if you have multiple people playing, and then, like, the level itself, naturally, without having to artificially change itself, in other versions. And so then, you've just been introduced to this mechanic, and then you have a chase sequence with Battleon, and she's chasing behind you, so you have to keep on going fast. And this keeps the tension, like, way high. And so the actual level itself isn't that difficult, but it feels super tense when you're being chased. And you have to go through these blocks, and they move you around so fast. And just... The level is great. And then it ends with, just a very simple section where you can just cool down. So this is after, you get away. And then there's just a bunch of random void blocks that you can dash through, because it's so satisfying. And there's a couple little secrets here. But then after that, this is essentially a de-stressing area after the stressful previous area. And then that part of the level, and then the level's over. And then you have, like, the whole narrative thing, which I think is really neat, but I won't talk about that now. And then you go back and you finish the level after waking up again, which that was just a really cool reveal that you've been dreaming this whole time.
Which makes sense, since you actually can't read anything while dreaming. Like, that's a known thing.
Like, that's an actual scientific phenomenon. It's how, like, you can tell if you're lucid dreaming, because if you can't read, you're in a dream, and then, you can lucid dream, and that's a completely different subject.
But also, fun fact about the chase sequence, part of what keeps that tension is the chaser is very specifically mirroring your actions a few seconds behind you. Mm-hmm. So you always have, like, a certain amount of distance between you, but it means if you, like, fumble up and get stuck in a section, you are going to die. But it also means you can very specifically control the route that they take and actually use that to maneuver around them and, like, dash past them, which makes for some really fun moments.
Yeah. Like the whole chase sequence is excellent,
and it just gets better as it progresses.
Mm-hmm.
The B-side variant of the chase is absurd, but great.
Yeah, I didn't find the B-side too crazy on that one. Like,
no,
I
it's the
thought
chase.
The B-side was really good
the
on that
chase,
one.
yeah. The chase really has some really neat, other than the end. But like the chase segment for the B-side was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that was the hardest part of the B-side, I think, other than just the final room, was like the chase, but it was like a good difficult. For me, my favorite stage is it's probably a toss up between the final ascent, because it's sort of like it revisits like all the mechanics from the earlier stages, and that was a lot of fun to sort of get all of those like in one segment, but also the stage before that, because it's like, I guess, the closest thing to a boss encounter in the fight, and especially with the B-side, it's intense. Like, is a phenomenally interesting confrontation, and I thought it was really neat for like the segment and learning it. Like, I really liked, because it brought a lot of mechanics. There was like the boulders, which you like
you dash into them and then they go in that direction that you dashed into them, and it's a, you know, they can squish you, but then you can ride them,
and you can also do like the momentum jumping thing. You can use them to smash through platforms, which is how you get some secrets there. You also have like the feathers, as I recall, in that stage.
It's like flying around.
Oh, it's fun. It's just fun. It's
yeah.
Super fun flying around stuff while there's spikes in the air. And the B-side actually has that during the boss fight, of you like flying around and dodging projectiles, and it's just all of the B-side and the A-side together for that stage would be sort of like, I think, my favorite thing for a specific mechanic. But overall stage, it's a toss-up between that one and the final ascent. Because the final ascent has like all those different slices of the various mechanics across the game, and it's really nice and satisfying. It's a lengthy segment, but because the way it keeps varying up between things you've done before and in different contexts, it felt really satisfying. Like, hey, I've mastered this section, I've mastered what can throw at me, moving on.
Right. Well, it's also sort of interesting because at this point, this is when you get your one permanent character upgrade, where you can dash 2 times in midair.
Oh, also where you get the assists.
Yes. Yeah, you get the assists as well. So this is like, they can do more with these mechanics now because your character is a bit more flexible. So they can make even harder versions of the levels which you just went through. And that was sort of neat, seeing how you could use all these mechanics in new ways now that you have a slightly different movement set.
Yeah. What was your favorite mechanic? What was it? The galaxy boxes?
I really like the galaxy boxes. I guess my favorite individual mechanic, if I had to choose one aside from the galaxy boxes, I'd probably say like the boxes you can dash into and then like they go in that direction. I just thought they were really neat, and they provided a nice level of control over your movement.
Yeah. They're a pain in the ass for the harder versions, though, where you're like dashing, riding, ducking as it speeds through, and then you're like trying to get them to dash and like running around on this thing while you're like making it avoid spikes. Like there were some vicious puzzles as you progress.
Oh,
which, you know,
I could imagine.
Like, on that subject of like viciousness, like we've talked a bit about how like there's story. And like a lot of games that are very story focused tend to be sort of light on difficulty, I find. Or that, or they're a very different breed of game. Like, you don't get a lot of, like, very story-focused platformers, but I felt like very much the difficulty in the game was, like, a big part of the story.
Mm-hmm. Like, because this is about climbing a mountain, essentially. If you
for
don't
someone
know
who's not even prepared, for like
yeah.
they point that out as it's not like she's a mountain climber or anything. She's called out on the fact that she's like this inexperienced person from the city who basically decided, like, I'm gonna climb this mountain because I need to.
Yep. By the way, if you ever have a random inclination to climb a mountain, don't do it. People have died doing that. At least, like, don't run off and climb Everest or something. That's not a good idea.
If my death count in Celeste is anything to go by, the main character should be dead like at least 3,000 or 4,000 times.
Yeah.
Like
over. Yeah. So the game itself is difficult, which it should be because it's about climbing a mountain, which, you know, that thematically ties into each other. But also the stuff I mentioned, where how it's taking inspiration from real life mountain climbing, like that also, in some way, makes it feel more like actual mountain climbing, and that's not really related to the story, but it is taking inspiration from real life and turning it into a gameplay feel that somewhat resembles the feeling of actually climbing a mountain.
And unlike Metal Gear Solid, you can't train up your grip strength.
No. Or Breath of the Wild.
Wait, that's a thing in there too? Do you do it by doing chin-ups in there too?
I think if you do enough dungeon, or not dungeons, but the shrines, you can upgrade your stamina.
Okay, no,
so you can climb more.
So in, like, Metal Gear Solid 2, you upgrade your grip strength by doing chin-ups. Just so you know.
Oh, that's annoying. I feel
It's
like
funny.
They just threw that in to kill time.
I mean, yeah. It's something you might not even ever find unless someone told you. But yeah, you can just sit there doing chin-ups if you're, like, doing nothing in particular, just talking to someone. And it increased your grip strength, so you could hold off ledges for longer. The more you know. But, like,
yeah,
there's story stuff, and we're gonna go a bit more into that when we get into, like, the more spoilery side of this, but we're still trying to keep this part of the skinny a bit low on spoilers. So
yeah,
another thing that I thought was actually really noteworthy about it was just sort of it was a small note about the art style, but I found it interesting was both, like, the Polaroid segments were neat, but also the meta interaction of the portraits. Normally, like, you'll see, like, in games where there's, like, a character portrait while someone's talking, they're fairly static images, and sometimes it's, like, terrible. And this one, though, it was actually really neat. It, like, took me by surprise because there are incidences where the character interacts with the medium, and it's sort of jarring in a sense because it gets that really surreal feeling when they can interact with that character box like it's actually there.
Yeah, like, not a lot of games do that. Like, really only Undertale. That's the only game that I think even uses that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Undertale had a lot of sort of meta references in both its narrative and its mechanics. But, yeah.
Yeah, like, there's a couple points in Celeste that caught me off guard in that regards.
I think they're all the Badlands sections, aren't they?
Yeah.
She's, like, the notable offender for doing that. And I think it's a very good... It was a very interesting way to highlight the sort of surreal nature of the character.
Yes. Because the character is super surreal, like, which I guess we'll get into that later. But it makes sense that she's the
imminently.
one who...
We're going to be getting into that imminently.
Yeah. Like, we only have one other thing to talk about
on the mechanic section. So,
yeah.
Take it away.
All right, so I guess they sort of wanted to finish off this, section with a short section just comparing it to, like, some of the other big platformers and just seeing, like, what did it take, what has it done for other platformers, where did it innovate, where did it, like, take an idea in a different platformer and change it. Just what are your thoughts on this initially, and then I'll give mine.
So first off, I found this very interesting because they're the big people who started off with the accessibility mode. I didn't really hear about this, like, exploding or going into big as many games as it did until Celeste rolled in and basically went like, we want people to enjoy the game, its stages, the work we put in, and to see the story. And, it's awesome if people are going to, like, tackle it on its first challenges, but for the people who don't, like, have a silly little sticker on your menu that says, like, assist mode. But yeah, you can just not die. You can have infinite grip strength if you need it. You can have... So that was a very interesting thing, because the game has some of the most frustrating difficulty in its B-sides and then, like, its C-sides, which...
Right.
Like, I legitimately, like... I can beat 4 of the B-sides for the game. So my knowledge of the C-sides is checking YouTube for a second, just being like, that is crazy, whoa.
There was a GIF on Reddit I saw, and I think this was actually, like, the first time I ever saw Celeste, of, like, the final core Seaside level, where it just goes on and on and on and on, and it's just one section of... So essentially the whole mechanic in the core is you're flipping between hot and cold, and then there, at the very end, it throws in this mechanic where while it's cold, the ceiling is descending, and while it's hot, the floor is ascending.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you have to, like, all the different elements change their properties, and it's crazy.
Certain obstacles, while they're in ice mode, are helpful to you. Other ones, when in fire mode, kill you dead.
Yep.
And others are helpful, like the wall ascenders. You can use those while in fire mode. You can't while in ice mode. So It's interesting because it forces you to time out how you're advancing. Also, is that one of the rooms where, like, also the left side of the screen is, like, panning forward and you have to, like, keep ahead of that too?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, because, like, the core is just a vicious level for that. Because it's like, I want you dead. I want you really dead. And
which, to even access it, like, you have to go through and get 4 hearts, which you can either explore all of the A-side levels for these blue hearts, which those are really hard to find, or you can beat the B-sides. So you have to do a lot of the game before it even gives you access to the core.
But it's like it's the final... It's like the final... I mean, it's not that restrictive. Clearing a combination of 4 B-sides or getting a couple hearts is fairly doable. I found, I think, 2 or 3 of the A-side hearts without being told or anything where they were, and I cleared 4 A-sides. So I could get into the A-side core without doing anything. Like, I actually saw B-side core. I can't recall if I cleared it or not, but, like, I needed to use assist mode to clear the other, like, few levels I couldn't normally clear in B-side, just so I could see what the core looked like. because I was like, I wonder what it looks like in B-side. I'm like, oh, hell. It is hell.
And then there's the Seaside.
Yeah, it is probably the deepest level of hell.
It's like 3 minutes of just a platforming gauntlet, and you can't die at any point along this entire gauntlet. At least that's from the GIF on Reddit that I saw.
You can't die. If it's a single room, you can't die, because you always get brought back to the start of the room. But the thing I was going to bring up here is this is also a very notable change from the prior works of these developers, because they also made the Climber series?
I think so.
Which are just hard. They're remarkably hard games. Their starting difficulty is essentially the B-sides for Celeste. So you have that these developers looked at this thing that started to go that picked up a fair amount of attention from people and had people dive in, and they went, we want people to play this. How do we do this? And then they brought in that accessibility mode. They made a very fun and challenging normal mode that's still not Satan. Yeah. Because there's other platformers I've played, god damn it, that ninja platforming game where you're running around collecting gold and dodging death traps.
Oh.
I can't recall what the hell it is. It's a lot of death and game overs and restarting.
Yeah.
That's a lot of it. It's I've noticed a lot of platformers that are very platform-oriented tend to be very high lethality. The issue with a lot of them, though, is they tend to get repetitive. Celeste isn't too long. It isn't too short. It has a very good grasp of how to change things up and provide unique challenges within the scope of its themed puzzles without really having them get worn out. And that's, I think, a pretty good lesson there. And it managed to have an interesting, fun story along the way and integrate the final two ability, the second air quote ability you get at the end of the game isn't an ability you can control. The improve to your dash is. The other one actually doubles as an obstacle of sorts. You use it to sort of traverse, but it's a thing you sort of have to activate, and it plays into how the final stages are sort of structured, and it's a lot of fun. They managed to make the game feel fun instead of mind-numbingly frustrating, and I think that was really nice.
Yes, at least until you get to the Seaside. Then you get the mind-numbingly frustrating.
I mean, no,
but most people
that hits there at B.
Those.
Friggin', what was it? Stage 6? On B-side is awful. No.
Yeah.
It's painful.
I've only played a couple of the B-sides, just because I have other games which I needed to finish. So I was mostly content with finishing the core. It gave me the closure I wanted, and that was pretty much all I needed. But
I mean, the B-side battle line fight is awesome, but getting to it is the biggest pain in the butt ever.
I would imagine.
There's a couple of those rock puzzles and also the platform puzzles that you need to get, and then they're just vicious, mean, harsh things. But you had platformers you want to compare this to.
Yes, I think it was interesting just to see the influence that it took from certain games. Mostly Super Meat Boy. I had a lot of flashbacks to Super Meat Boy when I played this game. Just because the whole general structure of the game feels very similar, where you have a series of worlds, each of which is broken up into distinct levels, which in Celeste, you only have like 7 levels, but they're broken down into
8.
several mini challenges.
8 levels.
Yeah, 8 levels, but they're all broken down into many different levels, so it is pretty much the thing that Super Meat Boy does, where it's broken up into like 15 sections per world.
I think it's broken into like 3 major checkpoints in Celeste, like the start, the middle, and like the pen, or like, but
like Super Meat Boy is like one panel.
Yeah, like Meat Boy
all
was
on like one screen.
Meat Boy came off feeling a lot less interconnected, whereas when you come to Celeste, it feels a lot more organic in its design.
Right.
And the way they squirrel things away inside their own stages. Because, like, for instance, like the second stage you mentioned, the heart in that stage is in, like, a really weird little nook. And the way they the way they hit it never would have really worked in Meat Boy, because it literally took advantage of a stage being laid out across multiple screens for its mechanic to function.
It also like required you to use an exploit in the game.
Yeah, that's like... which required multiple screens to do.
Yeah,
it's a dash reset when you move off a screen. Sure, like dashing to the edge of the screen to flip up and then dash back into the edge of the screen and just use that to go higher and higher. Which is hilarious and silly. Like
that was a fun heart.
Yeah.
I really liked exploiting the game when it let me.
And like the thing is, the developers, when they do stuff like that, show an awareness that these exploits are in the game. Because at first I was like, this is really weird. Did I like find something weirdly broken? And then I like go up and I'm like, nope, there's an item here. This is apparently what I'm supposed to be doing. This is really silly.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, because there is like that very Meat Boyish-y thing. I mean, I was never a huge fan of Super Meat Boy, admittedly, but like it definitely has that similar high lethality, flinging yourself between spikes and obstacles to get to an endpoint type feel.
Well, also like very fast respawns.
Oh yeah.
To the start of the stage with high lethality and a fairly like not too extensive of a moveset, at least when you compare it to something like Shovel Knight, where Shovel Knight has a pretty complex moveset, at least at the end of the game.
Although way less mobility comparatively.
Yeah. Well, it's also a different style of platformer. It's trying to be like,
Mega Man? It's melee Mega Man, to be honest.
Pretty much. Like you even have the thing where you get a special upgrade on each level. And
it's a little boss. Man. Yeah, it's a boss themed weapon that may or may not be more effective against it's Mega Man.
But then it's also like, at least the hook reminded me of Castlevania, and his main attack was sort of like DuckTales. And
yeah, I mean, it pulled from a lot.
It influenced from everything.
And but we'll get on that in a different video, because there's a lot to say about it.
Yeah, Super Meat Boy, or not Shovel Knight, it is its own thing, which is very distinct, but that's for a later day. In the meantime, so I just thought, this is Super Meat Boy, but I feel like this is better than Super Meat Boy, because, I don't know, there was always something about Super Meat Boy that I just couldn't really get into. I mean, I played it and I made it to the final level, and then I just never bothered to beat it. Which is a shame, because I really, I spent all this time going to the final level of Super Meat Boy, and then I just decided, I think I'll just play something else.
It never really fully clicked for me. I think I dabbled in the first 2 worlds, but I was just like, I'd rather play Darkest Dungeon.
I think the art style,
that didn't bother me.
There's something I don't know. Like, there's
I
something
mean,
about his art
Edmund's
style that I
super
cannot handle.
fascinated with like poop, blood, and syringes and other stuff, but
Yeah,
I mean,
like
that was a lot more tame in its art style than,
Isaac.
yeah. So, I mean,
Like,
didn't really
that's the
bother
big
me.
reason why I haven't played Isaac, honestly. um, and a couple other reasons, but
Let's get
again,
back on tangent then.
yes.
If that sums
So
up, does that sum up the main
yeah, that pretty
comparisons?
much sums up all the mechanical level design influence stuff that we want to talk about.
So,
So
on a totally mechanic level here, seriously, the game is fucking good. Uh, which now means we're venturing into spoiler territory. If you want to just sort of like splash something on the screen there for that. Um,
spoiler splash. Boom.
boom. And
Spooky.
now narrative splash, because yeah,
Splish.
we're now going to be talking a bit about the story aspects, and like we've already sort of danced around this for a few times. And I guess the best lead in here is when it comes to the interlinked for the story in tandem with its difficulty, it's because the main character is dealing with something that is incredibly difficult. And it's also part of why the character of
Battle line. Yep.
yeah, is just so important. More or less, the character isn't just about some person decides to like dick off to the middle of like nowhere in Vancouver. It's in Canada, so I guess like everyone in the United States is somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Goes off and it's like, I need to climb a mountain. She's doing it to confront something very physical, because it's not as easy to confront something very mental. And a lot of the game is her grasping that, she has depression and anxiety, and it's not something it ever really like ham-fistedly feeds down your throat. Like it's said, but it's not like hours
it
of
doesn't
angst.
spend.
Yeah, it doesn't spend hours of angst. There's some scenes and it tackles it, but I mean, a lot of it is it characterizes Madeline, who is literally her anxiety incarnated.
Personified. Yeah.
And you get these very neat things of like her talking, and you get to look at it where it's like that thing where she's like talking about, when she talks about other people, you get this very interesting look of like the character's sort of like outer feelings, but then those sort of creeping inner feelings, those things where someone's trying to protect themselves, because like Madeline states, like actively she's trying to protect her, that anxiety is a defensive reflex, rather that incarnation of the anxiety is trying to defend her from something she can't quite put her finger on, and it does so in like the most vicious way possible. But
yeah, which like in the second level it literally describes her as a part of Madeline, which I found this part of Madeline super interesting, because this is all internal and there's nothing she can do to escape this. She just has to learn to cope with it over the course of the game. And in the end, she doesn't, vanquish battle into the Shadow Realm. But yeah, like she doesn't get banished. She just exists, and she just has to deal with the fact that she will always have some anxiety, and this will always be a part of her. But at
it's
the end of the
tackling
day,
it more healthily.
yes. Which, like, there's even the segment of the game where you literally have to blow a feather up and down to simulate like breathing. You know, like just imagining a feather, and it literally goes through step by step how to cope with anxiety, or at least how one character suggests you could cope with anxiety. And this is an actual practical tip that you could probably use in real life.
Because it is based off the idea of controlling your breathing to help control your overall emotional state. It's like the same things that people use to also, like, because it's a panic attack, and anxiety and panic attacks go hand in hand. And yeah, sometimes like the only thing you can do is just try and center yourself, because it's awful. You basically, like, I've had a pair of panic attacks in my life, and you basically feel like you're dying, like you're having a heart attack. Like, my dad's had a heart attack and then went, I can't tell the difference between a panic attack and a heart attack. So I was like, good to know I won't see it coming.
I've been fortunate enough not to like die over from anxiety yet, but then I haven't had to go through college yet, so we'll see how that goes.
University was the clincher for me.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine, because that, you know, high school is easy mode of life. You know, everything after this.
Really? I thought it was grade school.
Well, I guess grade school.
Because it's not as horribly shitty clicky where you like lose a bunch of friends for the first time.
Yeah. Like, I guess it just depends on your personal experience, but yeah, like high school is not bad at all compared to college. But then I wouldn't know.
I mean, my college was like fun. I liked it. High school is awful. Yeah. College was great. Get on my level. But
I mean, yes. Another thing I sort of wanted to bring up was that there are other characters aside from Madeline who are all in this story, and they all, for the most part, are all dealing with anxiety in some way. So you have like Theo, who's like this other mountain climber, and he is obsessed with his self-image and like social media. And he has like this anxiety of just being watched. At least I got this impression that he, at least at times, had like this anxiety of just the pressure of always being watched, and how that can affect you.
I'm just going to interject here. I don't think it was necessarily that. Like, I took a slightly different thing of that. It was a thing where he felt the need to, because, like, keep in mind, he was like, I'm putting this on Instagram. It was like the thing of, like, he needed to be acknowledged for someone to see it. Like, he's a friendly, upbeat thing. Like, a friendly, upbeat guy. Like, there's even some, like, things that, like, the artists have done, the game people, and, like, in the, where you maintain that friendship with him after the mountain. And because he's, like, a genuinely nice guy. He's just, like, a bit of, like, a hipster, basically. Like, flannel shirt he wearing, super hipster. But there's this, like, I get the impression that he's sort of trapped in that whole need to put himself under that scrutiny, which is why he's trapped in the temple.
Yes, like
he's stuck in that cycle of
and there's
posting
eyes
those pictures
everywhere.
Yeah,
like, and they're all focused on him. And so that's like what that entire section is about, is you have to carry him through the temple with all these eyes and Lovecraftian monsters barreling down on you.
Though on the bright side, he has some great dialogue during the segment.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
I just thought he had pretty good dialogue in general. I thought he was a fun character.
and
That's
just
all I
like,
really had to say.
I mean, fair enough. And it's just sort of fun that like it's one of those moments where I also really like because inverted the trope of you needing to be saved as a female character, but it actually flipped around to where you're saving him. I mean, you could argue it as like some sort of insecure narcissism. You could argue it as just like a thing of being known, of people noticing you, of being noticed or making an impact or an imprint on the world. There's any number of ways you could interpret it, but I think the ultimate, like what I took with it from it, was because he was trapped. It was like being stuck in these habits, these patterns.
I think that's a fair reading of that. Probably more accurate than mine, honestly.
And yeah. Also, I don't think the old woman has anxiety. She's pretty cheerful.
No,
with life.
I feel like she was the transcendent one. Like she's the one who's gone through life and nothing can bother her anymore at this point because she's seen it all.
Although that manager, spot on there. He is a hot mess.
Yes, like literally all of like the levels with him. He's just talking to himself and freaking out. And that's just what he does.
You fool! You're losing her.
Oh.
Of course no one would stay here.
This.
Yeah.
Wait, which that's like just him being, you know, super hard on himself. Because, you know, he doesn't want to have his, you know, hotel be bad or a bad experience.
Which, I mean, poor guy. He's like haunted. He's a ghost. He's a ghost. Okay, we're in spoiler territories. We're allowed to say this. He's dead. He's been dead for a while. So his hotel has been like gradually running down over the course of like 2 decades or something. So he's an incorporeal ghost who's stuck haunting it, which I feel means he can't really do much to fix his patterns. He can do his role. Like, I feel that's another thing, is like Theo and him both are sort of stuck in their patterns until like the very, very ending. So he does his manager thing, and he tries to do it well. And it's very like he's like, oh, let me show you this wonderful, luxurious, first class room. Oh, where's the maid service? This place is a mess. How can I deal with this? How I can't show her. Can you just maybe show me the? Oh, she's gonna leave now. I have to get her to stay here. I really need this for this hotel. Oh, I'm just going to go do some cleaning as I float harmlessly in the spot and you do all the work.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that stage.
And then this culminates in him turning into a giant monster ghost.
Vampire hotel manager ghost. Basically.
Yes.
He had like
and then
pointy
he just
vampire.
chases through like everywhere.
Though,
and
though you do sort of deserve it.
Yes, because Badeline essentially
is your inner voice and bitches him out so royally it's not funny. I mean, he still could have like let it go, but I could see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
Also, I had stomped him more than a Goomba.
It was so satisfying to stomp on his head.
I needed the
probably
jump
more than it should have been. Yeah, but so he has anxiety, and like we said, the old lady, she is sort of the odd one out, because she just has seen it all, and is unfazed.
She is as happy as strawberry pie. Did you actually get like a good strawberry pie in your ending, by the way?
I think I got a decent strawberry pie. Like, they said it wasn't bad, but
I got the super good one because I was like obsessively going over the strawberries.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like, I got them when I could, but I also wouldn't spend too long going for each one. And there's also, it's easy to miss a lot of them
I
because they can
victory
just,
lapped like a bunch
yeah.
of the levels. You don't even need to get all of them to get a super good pie, by the way.
Yeah.
Just like a good portion of them.
I probably could if I went back and did it. I've
Yeah.
gotten a couple more after I went to the core, playing through some of the levels.
The core doesn't even have that many in it.
No, I don't think it even has. Well,
I think it might
does
have
it
like.
have?
I think it has like 8 in
Yeah.
there. It has a very small amount. If you're going to be getting strawberries, you're better off like a victory lapping some of the first stages and just looking for secrets. Because the challenges that they're hidden behind are doable.
Yep, they're super easy on the first stage. Like, I've been playing that a lot, just, studying it and all its level design intricacies. And, I've gotten so good, I might even consider just seeing how fast I can beat it and just speed run that entire level. And maybe throw it up on speedrun.com.
Let me know when you learn how to spike jump.
Oh,
yeah,
that will not be fun.
I've pulled it off once.
I'm not going for world record here.
I mean, not even world record, but just getting a decent speed run. But like, I pulled off a spike jump once, and it was amazing because it lets you dash like again.
Ooh, nice.
Because it counts as a solid surface.
Let's see here. Does it have individual level?
Also,
it does not have individual level. Oh wait, no, it does.
What did you take away from the story just to get you back on tangent?
Yes. So essentially, the moral of the story, which I've thought about this a bit, and I guess the moral of the story I got from Celeste is that anxiety, you can fight it as much as you want, but just trying to beat it back and deny that it exists is fruitless and a waste of time. And just learning how to deal with your anxiety and get through that is going to be more productive and healthy in the long run. I think that's what I took away from the story.
Strawberries are delicious.
Yeah.
But,
don't go to ghost hotels.
Yeah. Don't climb a mountain as a novice unless it has mystical properties that bring you back to life. Shit. Because, you did a pretty good job of, like, summing up, I guess, a major moral or what you took from the story. Like, I have, like, anxiety, not as bad as some people, but, like, I'm not the most functional person in the world, so it was interesting sort of watching how she reacted and confronted some things, and, like, the major denial and the way she confronted her issues as well, and, like, also the phone call in the second level just hit really hard.
Oh, yeah. That phone call.
We're not
which is what I was alluding to earlier.
No spoilers.
We were talking about that level.
Avoiding that, but, like, oof. But yeah, it really does sort of handle the whole thing of, like, outrunning or ignoring your anxiety isn't really a feasible course of action. Like,
no.
Actively confronting it and sort of working around the limitations and everything else is sort of, like, needed to progress, and it very literally works within that framework.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I also really like that it gave very human sort of depictions of, like, essentially what is mental illness. A lot of times when games handle mental illness, it's very hammy, hyped up stuff that it makes, characters complete liabilities or unlikable. It plays it up for the sake of drama or tropes. So it was really nice that it handled it in a very respectful and responsible manner.
Well, it even sort of showed the benefits that Madeline could have. That yes, because she had anxiety, she's not going to do a lot of stupid stuff because it's dumb and you shouldn't do that because it will get you killed. I mean, she literally talks about how maybe we shouldn't go on this lift, and then the lift breaks and she nearly dies on the lift.
Maybe you should not climb this mountain. Maybe you should go and do something safe. It's very much those words of fear and hey, be mindful of your own limitations. It's done to a certain excess because that's, I guess, part of what comes with that sort of anxiety. But there's also a number of moments where Madeline is saying stuff and it's sensible. There are very sensible aspects to it. Another thing I think that was neat, and it's sort of narrative framework, but it's more of a meta narrative framework. It's very positive towards the players.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get a lot of those messages during load screens or etc. where it's remember to take a break. That they're very positive messages for the players itself, and even the assist mode is some games would mock you for taking an easier difficulty, like Wolfenstein, for instance. Yep. And this one is just go for it. I mean, it's not called easy mode, baby mode, Ska Studios, fucking Pretty Pink Princess for indie reviewer, for game reviewers mode, which is hilarious, by the way.
Yeah, if you're gonna call it something ridiculous, that's the way to go.
Oh yeah, a complete slap at game reviewers who can't actually beat games. I mean, I appreciate
or even get past the tutorial. In the case of Cuphead.
Shots fired. I mean, it's apparently a different genre from the guy what normally he dabbles in. Because I probably
maybe reading is just a little bit hard for this guy, and you can't read the text clearly on the screen that clearly spells out how to perform certain actions. But maybe he shouldn't be expected to know how to do that.
I was trying to give him a pass there, man. Harsh. I mean, we don't know how many drinks he'd already had in him.
Maybe.
I mean, if it was a convention or any sort of booth thing, I would hopefully have a couple drinks in me by that point. If I was going booth to booth, because you can totally drink to rehydrate yourself, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's how that works.
That's totally how that works. But I'd probably still play Cuphead better than that tutorial. But anyways. Yeah, I mean, it's a very positive game, and it inspired, I think, a lot of positivity from there. So both in the narrative sense and the meta-narrative. I'd have to say it's definitely worth plunging into, and as daunting as platformers can be, I definitely think it's accessible in a number of ways.
Yes, even if you just hit a brick wall and you just want to know how the story ends, the game accommodates you and says, all right, we'll let you through, no questions asked. And, that's a very bold move, today, when even Mario can't get away with, if you've died a couple too many times, we'll just give you a free pass to move on to the next level, essentially with a super power-up. And Mario can't even do this without getting backlash. But I think, the reception to Celeste mode has been mostly positive. I haven't heard anyone
Is the super power-up thing in Mario an optional thing it gives you, or is that just
It's an optional thing. So if you want to collect it, you can. It just spawns you. It spawns it to the side. So if you want to collect it, you can collect it, but you can just continue the level if you don't want. And it only appears after you've died a lot.
Okay.
So overall, I'd say it's not too bad. Like, it doesn't give you the same amount of control that, like, Celeste does.
But more or less, that sums up the gist of this particular episode with us talking about Celeste's gameplay and story. So yeah, the TLDR, it's totally worth buying it, even if it's not on sale. Though, I mean, I do love me some Steam sales. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to like and comment below. We do try to get back to everyone who says something. And subscribe if you'd like to see more of this. We do other podcasts. There's going to be little slices of indie gameplay coming up. There's developer interviews, and there is a TTRPG project in the wings. In the interim, if you'd like to share our content to other people that you think might be into this, that's always appreciated. And I'd like to say a very special thank you not only to the viewers currently watching, but also to you, Chariot Rider, for joining in and helping make this discussion awesome.
You are welcome. I love coming on and talking about good indie games, and this is definitely one to check out. I'm assuming you'll throw my channel in the
oh yeah, your channel is going to be
description.
In the description with, links to it, and I guess I'll probably stick your Twitter in there again too. Overall though, I honestly do look forward to doing more of these, and for those people following, if you enjoyed Chariot Rider's work, listen to his more game design oriented stuff on his channel.
Yeah, like if you enjoyed what I had to say about level design, I should have a video about the level design of Celeste, actually, if not coming out soon, already out.
And there'll actually probably be a link inside the description, so let's be fair. Done.
Yeah. Yes. So it was done. It was a great success. Top-notch video, best one I ever made. Maybe. I mean, I can't read the future. I have no idea.
Such faith.
I don't know. This is a fun one. I've enjoyed making this video. But anyway, yeah. Like, I also talk about, other indie games, if you're into those, like Papers, Please, Armello. I also talk about just general design theory. So not really specific to any game, but just talking about why certain games do certain things in certain ways. And yeah, that's it.
In the meantime, folks, stay tuned, and I'll catch you later.